Tonight on the Cover One Buffalo podcast, we will be going through the Buffalo Bills roster Lofton exercise, our biggest team needs, and all kinds of new coaching hires. But first, our guys, Handsome Jack.
Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia worldwide with Greg Tompsett and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL. Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, along with my partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. Aaron,
Yo,
the offseason sucks.
this is the worst.
There's like someone's going to play football on Sunday, but not my team. And I just like, there are things I like about the offseason. There's even like a weird part of me that got conditioned to it over the drought years to where like the perpetual hope of the offseason and the potential for improvement actually was the best part of our offseason and or our overall season. And I just, now that we have a good football team, that watching them is fun.
Yeah.
I want to watch more football, and it's so far away.
Yeah. So obviously fans of the show will know that my brother, big Bears fan, and I was talking to him really even like since before the season ended. And all he wants to talk about is the draft, right? Like it's the Bears.
They've
like,
been doing mock drafts since like November.
Oh man, and they're infighting and just like, yeah, he just is ready for it. And not that we ever had like what the Bears have going into the draft this year necessarily, but I will say what comes with having a perennial contender of a team is that the offseason isn't as exciting, like, and especially a team that's up against the cap too. So it's like, we don't have great draft assets and things are tight and the roster is in pretty good shape. There are some few needs we're going to talk about. There's maybe a little bit more than we think there is. But it's not going to be exciting. It's not going to be sexy. These moves aren't going to be the things that are like, get you really excited to tweet out. I'm sure we'll get over excited about some of these thrift store moves that Bean ends up making, but it's nowhere near when you're picking in the top 15. And you know, you can look at some of these blue chip prospects and like drool over the impact they're going to have. It's like, okay, maybe we just hang out and see what happens at 28. I don't know.
Yeah. So first off, Boo Roy, are you your team not playing February? That's not nice. I don't like you. The approach to it is, it's going to be interesting. We'll talk about it, and we're obviously going to go through the full spectrum of all the different phases of the offseason. We'll do some final review things looking at the roster now. We'll get into specific like re-signings and who our best case scenario is to bring back, or
salary cap extravaganza. I know you'll be excited for that.
Yes, we will do the salary cap extravaganza. I am very excited for that.
There we go.
We'll go through some different pieces that direction, but as we get into our free agent wish list, show is going to be really muted. Like, it's going to be trying to find different guys in different spots. We're going to talk through all the different things of, we have 10 draft picks. How many do we need to make the roster financially?
How many can make the roster
spots? Yes. We've been in a phase for a while now where we had a lot of really nice luxury depth at a lot of different spots, and not like highly paid, but moderately paid. A lot of like, the $1.77 million thing last year, a lot of $2 million, $2.5 million, $3 million guys. Heck, I think we had 5 defensive tackles all making more than $3 million in change. And we're now going to shift into a mode where now we're going to need more cheap guys on the roster, and some of our depth is going to need to come from draft picks, and that'll be interesting to talk through. And that leads us into tonight's topic. We're going to go through the roster. We're going to kind of give a Lofton exercise, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to let you answer. RJ asking here, I honestly can't remember if the Lofton exercise was actually named after James Lofton.
I'm almost 100% sure.
I'm 99% sure.
Yeah,
I'm
it is
pretty
something
sure.
Eric Turner brought to Sack Cover One years ago. And I'm pretty sure it comes from James Lofton.
I think so. I really think it is.
I'm gonna look it up while you're talking.
Yeah, we'll find out, but I'm pretty sure it is. So before we get into that, there was a little bit of news today that we'll touch on briefly here. The Buffalo Bills have announced 3 new coaching hires, and some corresponding moves. So in a similar move, we obviously heard about the move of Bobby Babich being promoted to defense coordinator, Joe Brady being promoted to offense coordinator. Not a direct correlated move, but we saw Eric Washington go and take the defense coordinator job in Chicago. We had the same right before they announced Bobby Babich taking the defensive coordinator job. Today, we saw the hire of Ronald Curry as quarterback coach. We'll talk about him in a moment. Jahmile Addae as cornerbacks coach, and Christian Taylor as the defensive quality control coach. So, Ronald Curry was a former, for anybody who's as old as I am, in the mid 90s. He was the first player I had ever heard of who was the number 1 recruit in the country in both basketball and football. He was a quarterback in the same little hotbed where like Aaron Brooks and Allen Iverson and Michael Vick and Marcus Vick all were, and he was the best one.
Yeah.
Like he was actually better in high school than all those guys. Ended up playing at University of North Carolina, played basketball. Him and Julius Peppers played basketball for UNC and football for UNC. Ended up converting to wide receiver, playing like 7 years in the NFL, and now has been floating around. He coached wide receiver. He was an offensive assistant in San Francisco, offensive assistant in New Orleans, then wide receiver coach, then quarterback coach, then passing game coordinator. So kind of an interesting mix of he's played quarterback at a high level. He's played wide receiver at a pro level. He's coached wide receiver in the NFL, coached quarterback in the NFL, and been a passing game coordinator in the NFL. I thought that was an interesting mix. Joe Brady coached with him in New Orleans, so obviously vouched for him or didn't veto the hire. If he had, if he didn't like him, he obviously could have brought that up before he was hired. So I'm gonna assume that he vouched for him. But I don't know enough about whether this is a great hire or where he ranks in quarterback coaches in the NFL, but I'm at least intrigued by the versatility of his background and the fact that Joe Brady vouched for him and brought him along.
Yeah, I would even go a step further in my assumption that it was a Joe Brady hire for his staff.
Yeah, maybe encouraging or seeking him out.
Yeah, I would think that he had a say in this. Look, Sean McDermott, I'm going to take him at his word in terms of what he says about what he gives coordinators in terms of the fingerprint they have on their side of the ball. And he's talked about it, have been a coordinator himself, having sort of that autonomy. And I know people want to talk about, well, he took over play calling for Leslie Frazier and, he wanted to force Brian Dable to run the ball all the time. And I don't know that any of that has weight. I think that's all speculative. When we hear him speak about it, we hear constantly like, you need to let those people, put their fingerprint, put their mark and personality on it. And to me, this hire of Curry kind of shows that. I'm not going to speculate as to your point, what kind of coach he's going to be. Honestly, I didn't even know he was a guy that was coaching in the NFL. I remember him as like you were talking, being a prospect in 2 sports, because I always think that stuff cool as a big Charlie Ward fan growing up. And so those types of guys I think are really cool. But I didn't know he was still a coach. So I have no idea of what he's going to bring to the table. But I do trust Brady in terms of he's been in that quarterback room with Josh Allen. And I think the most important thing of that room is to steal one from Kyle Salagi here is the vibes, right? And I think that Brady at least knows whether or not he's a good coach and what type of philosophy he's going to bring to that room. He's going to mesh with the vibes of the most important player in the franchise, which is Josh Allen. And so I trust that he picked at least the right guy in terms of coaching Josh.
Yeah. So we'll see where it goes. I'm encouraged. I like that it's a Joe Brady, whether it's his number 1 choice and brought him along, or whether he was on board or recruited him. Obviously, he's significantly in favor, so I'm good with that.
Yeah.
The next one was a surprise. Jahmile Addae comes in as the cornerback coach, and that was announced moments before it was announced that John Butler and the team have agreed to part ways.
Yeah.
So it's really hard not to read the Eric Washington move and the John Butler move as them reading the writing on the wall that, oh, you guys picked Bobby Babich, who's, you know, right, wrong, or indifferent, pretty materially younger than those two guys.
Yes.
And on a different trajectory than they are. And that, oh, if I want to get to be a defense coordinator, it's not going to be here.
Yeah.
And, you know, I respect that if they think Bobby Babich is the best guy for the job, which I've been, you know, advocating for 2 years now. That's great. I selfishly kind of wanted a guy like John Butler as the veteran guy in the room for Bobby Babich as a first-time defensive coordinator. He obviously still has Sean McDermott.
Al Holcomb too.
Correct. Al Holcomb going from a senior advisor to replacing Babich as the linebacker coach. So he has vets in the room. He's going to be fine. We talked about it in our staff chat. I probably ascribed a larger piece of the pie of how much our DBs have outproduced either their contract when it's guys like Poyer and Hyde and what they were considered when they came aboard versus what they ended up as, or draft picks like Taryn or Levi Wallace or Christian Benford and what they ended up doing. I ascribed a pretty healthy amount of that to John Butler. Maybe it was more Sean McDermott. Maybe it was more the scheme and good discussions with the front office for who fits. But I'm fine with it. I'm not panicking, but I would have loved to seen John Butler stay.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what Jahmile Addae can do, but I certainly was, I'll say at least, disappointed to hear John Butler was leaving the organization.
It's nobody can say it's a good thing to have good coaches leave, right? And we know players have spoken highly of Butler. I remember Rasul Douglas when he first got here talking about Butler pulling him to the side and showing him a few plays that he might see right away, and then Rasul saying he saw him, like he saw those plays and knew how to react because of that. So like he's objectively a good coach. Position coaches, I'd have a tough time getting frustrated over because there's a lot of these guys in the league, and people outside of Buffalo probably don't know that much about John Butler. Like we don't know a bunch about some of the guys coming our way, right? Like we are happy with him. We've seen the progress and him being able to do a lot with a little, turning Christian Benford into a starter, right? What he's been able to do with Dane Jackson, guys like Levi Wallace, getting more out of those guys. And to your point, not that I want more on Sean McDermott's play, but we've seen him do that throughout his career as well. And I think that Addae here, from everything that I've been seeing, again, another coach that I don't have a ton of familiarity with, but as we're seeing, I'm excited to see, you know, Eric was pointing out some of the small philosophical changes, even though they run a lot of the same concepts, how they teach the technique is a little bit different. So maybe some of the frustration we've seen with you hear a lot about players not making plays on the ball, or even there was probably some conversation about why hasn't Kaiir Elam taken the steps that we thought he would, and was that a coach is just not trusting him or whatever? Can Addae sort of get him broken from being a bust into being a worthy pick that gets on the field? So there's still some interesting things about it, but yeah, no matter how you slice it, no matter how you feel about it, losing a good coach is never a good thing for the organization. Hopefully they just replace him with another good coach so we don't feel it.
Yeah, I've had a couple people, obviously everybody pretty famously knows I'm a very casual college football fan. So not only do I not know, I don't know all the head coaches to all the big schools, let alone coordinators, certainly not position coaches.
I should know the position coaches though of Miami, because our good friend at Lofton and Greg, huge Miami stan. Anytime they make any move, I usually get a DM immediately. He's like, we're coming, baby. So woo! I should knew this one already.
Yeah. So I learned that Jahmile Addae was a human who existed when he was hired today by the Bills. Some people who are plugged into that space did share that he was considered a much better coach than recruiter, and that his skills will translate to the pros better than some guys who are more on the recruiting side of it than the coaching side of it. And he hated the recruiting piece of it, and that was a reason for him wanting to go to the pros. So I'll take it. My response to that person was, I like this information, so I'm going to accept it as truth and not verify it whatsoever.
And everywhere he's been, they've had good DBs. even
Correct.
in the college ranks. So
I know our guy Uber Hans Hansen
Mhm.
went through the DBs that came out of the schools he coached at over the last 4 or 5 years, and he's had a really nice run of
Yeah.
guys that he worked with that have turned into very good players. So
including future
I'm
Bills
excited to see
Cam
it.
Kitchens.
Obviously, Cam Kitchen.
Yeah.
So a name to watch out for when we get into draft season. So we'll see where that goes. Again, with Jim Saldano as the safety coach, now Jahmile Addae is the cornerbacks coach, rolling up to Bobby Babich, and it doesn't look like we're going to have a defensive backs or a passing game coordinator role anymore. So I think we're going to have a pretty traditional defensive structure. We now have Marcus West as the D-line coach, Al Holcomb as linebacker coach, a corner and a safety coach, and a defensive coordinator. And that's just a very traditional standard structure. I still have not heard anything definitive reported on who's calling plays on game day, but some
Sounds
of
like they're
these
still
other
working through
moves,
that. Yeah.
I lean one more degree further that maybe it is going to be Bobby Babich right off. We'll see. I'm curious for it. The last one, Christian Taylor, continues the pipeline from William and Mary. He was a quarterback at William and Mary. He's coached at several different places at the collegiate level. I would say most of it on offense, but some of it on defense. It was interesting that he was now brought in as a defensive quality control coach. But I think sometimes they like that, to have the different perspective and the different approach to it. So, just an assistant role, obviously some of those duties and prep things. We've had some other moving pieces go around. So some of those roles, whether it was Al Holcomb or some of the other, like assistant position guys, bringing in somebody else to be able to support some of those things makes sense. I don't know that we're done with hiring, but this seems like it's kind of rounding the staff into shape.
Yeah, and the quality control, you see that move actually happen a lot with coaches where if they do make a switch, it's into quality control of one of the other sides. And it isn't like as much coaching as it is.
Raheem Morris is the exception. Most guys don't
Yeah.
do it at the higher position level
Right.
or coordinator level. But
They'll
it's
switch
not
up
that
there.
uncommon at the quality control.
Yeah, and one thing I want to give hats off because again, I'm sure Twitter is going to take a while. Then I'm a huge Sean McDermott stan, but hats off to them because I thought with the quarterbacks coach, I thought almost certainly it would be an internal hire. We know Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott love to bring up their own guys and stuff like that. But they brought in a couple guys now from the outside, from different programs, and
I hadn't connected those dots until some people pointed that out today, because you've been really good about, Marcus West was assistant D-line coach and replaced him. We had, Al Holcomb was the defensive senior assistant and was the backfill. Bobby Babich was an internal promotion. Joe Brady was an internal promotion. I hadn't connected the dots that the one area they've consistently brought from the outside has been quarterback coach. I think that's an interesting path. And now 3 straight with a very clear eye towards succession planning. Ken Dorsey came in from the outside as quarterback coach, moved up to offensive coordinator. Joe Brady came in from the outside as quarterback coach, moved up to offensive coordinator. I won't go as far as to say that any promises or guarantees were made to Ronald Curry, but he's not a dummy. He's watched the last 2 of them do that. So obviously if he comes in and does well, he obviously is hoping that if Joe Brady moves on, either he goes with him as offensive coordinator or replaces him here as offensive coordinator, as we've done 2 times in a row previous to now.
Yeah. But in bringing in a guy to handle the defensive backs from the outside, not like having some internal hire or somebody that Sean's worked with in the past, I think those are signs of trying to continue to evolve your staff and bring in the best talent, whether or not they've been with you before or not. And so I think those are good things in terms of leadership and building out a staff.
Yeah. So we'll see where those things go. I'm very curious and interested to see it. We obviously know that Sean McDermott has had a great hand in the defensive back development, and now he's going to have a chance to develop a first-time pro coach, with Jahmile Addae, and we'll see where that goes, along with the combination of, Bobby Babich being a first-time coordinator. I think that's going to, whether McDermott's calling the plays on game day or just helping support those guys, he's obviously still going to be very involved in the defense and fully connected there. Maybe this lets him take a half step back towards the overall CEO style coach. But I expect him to still be fully involved in that side. And, I don't think they would go as far as naming Bobby Babich defensive coordinator in name only and not giving him some level of autonomy and responsibility for what's going on there. So
I also
we'll see
don't
where it goes.
think that he would like he's going to take that job anyway because there's a pay raise, but he legitimately had multiple interviews and stuff like that. Like I'm sure within that negotiations to become the defensive coordinator that he knows he wants that autonomy. So I'm sure they're working through it. I don't know if there'll be some training wheels to it or not, but I think he will have quite a bit of autonomy in calling the games.
Yeah, so we'll see where that goes. Looking forward to it, and we'll see the next steps. Let's dive right in here. So tonight, for anyone who isn't familiar, Aaron, why don't you explain to the people what the Lofton exercise is and why it's a good idea when we get into a topic like what our biggest team needs are?
Yeah, so normally you would go through like player by player. We're going to do it by position grouping here just because we want to keep this under an hour and get out of here tonight. But you can go by player or position group. And it's basically you rank them in 3 categories of you win because of this person, which is you're talking about the elite of the elite, or they are good enough to win with, or you need better. And I think it's a good just bird's eye view way to look at it to hone in on really what are the needs when you look objectively at some of these situations. Like, can you win with what you've got, or do you really need better at these positions? And Greg, as we get into it, man, this is the first time we've been doing this. We're heading into outside of the free agency aspect that we're going to have to also talk about, but the 2023 Bills, a lot of good enough to win with. A lot of that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, almost every single
all.
spot in that there's maybe
except
one
for Josh
2.
Allen, who's gonna you win because so.
Correct. Yeah. So, well, it's funny you say that. I didn't have a lot of win because of. I didn't.
No.
There's a couple. I had more than one. I had more than one win because of.
Okay.
But there weren't very many.
I didn't. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So let's go through. We can start very quickly. The first spot's quarterback. How do you feel about our quarterback position?
Yeah. I mean, if there has ever been a win because of, like if there's a rank above that in the Lofton exercise, you would have to give it to Josh Allen. This is why I believe he should be the MVP of the league. There's no other team that the quarterback just does more to win games than Josh Allen does for the Buffalo Bills. So yeah, it's this absolute no-brainer. You win because of Josh Allen. Now, backup quarterback has always been in flux. I think if we were doing it on an individual basis for the last couple of years, I don't think it's been good enough. Dating back to the Matt Barkley, Mitch Trubisky, and now Kyle Allen, that has never been enough. But they're not going to have the type of assets where you probably can use a draft pick or have like salary cap tied up into a quarterback that is a backup that's going to feature. If Josh Allen goes down, we're screwed, and you just wait till next year.
Yeah. So I would make the case that there's only one player in the entire NFL who has a stronger case or as strong of a case for win because of than Josh Allen, and it's the one starting in the Super Bowl Sunday night. And that I still don't think there's anyone who has a greater impact on their team or is more valuable to their team than Josh Allen is. And he is the definition of the MVP award, whether he actually gets it every year or ever, since he hasn't got it yet. He is that answer. And I am now fully on the train of, we brought Ronald Curry here, so Jameis Winston should be our backup quarterback just because that's fun. Like, Jameis Winston is just a fun dude. I assume he's going to want more money than we're going to want to pay. I'm actually fully on the train of, hey, we've got like 6 picks in the 5th, 6th, and 7th round. Pick the best quarterback that's left who's like moderately athletic and let him learn. Like, we haven't had a good backup quarterback situation here. Kyle Allen isn't any good at football. Matt Barkley isn't any good at football. We learned that Case Keenum was no longer any good at football. Like, it's not like Mitch Trubisky isn't all that good at football.
People thought Mitch Trubisky, the Bills Mafia owes me an apology
God.
because people thought he was way better than him. And I was like, if this guy gets in, we're screwed. And people were like, no, we can't lose him. There's people like, we can't lose him in free agency.
Oh my God. So, since we're not going to have anybody who's any good, we might as well have somebody cheap. So just pick somebody cheap. And maybe we get lucky and we get a Brock Purdy or something like that, or a Jimmy Garoppolo situation where we have a tradable asset, but just have somebody cheap.
I am going to have a tough time when it comes to doing mocks, not taking Jordan Travis and taking a waiver on somebody.
Wait, hold on. Florida State.
Yeah.
I'm proud of myself for even knowing that.
It got hurt, and it's going to hurt his draft stock. He'll still be more of an asset than anybody in the chat is going to want to put on a quarterback, but that's where I'm at. Like, hey, this guy got hurt. You're buying at an all-time low on a prospect. So that's my hot take for the draft season, is that's going to be popping up on a lot of my mocks.
I'm here for it.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to running back. I did win with, it's obviously well above need better. And I won't lie, I had a moment where, just for principle, did I want to try to make the case that it's getting the closest to win because of that we've had, like, since Josh has been here. We talked about it in the recap show, and those statistics I shared on James Cook. It was just really, really exciting. I don't know how many running backs in the NFL period can be like Christian McCaffrey is a player you win because of.
Yeah.
And I struggle for a minute to find like a healthy Jonathan Taylor. Like, I don't even know how many other running backs in the NFL can make a case that you win because of. So I'm not going to say James Cook is, but I'll say I feel better about the future of the running back position in Buffalo than I have for a while. I'm more optimistic. I think we'll do one more little investment, a mid-round pick to add to probably Ty Johnson and James Cook, and I feel better about it than I have in a bit.
I also have it to win with. Going into free agency, it needs to be better. And that's dependent on, I think if you get Ty Johnson back and, like you're saying, add some mid to late round pick, I'm okay with that. Like, I can roll with that. I think Ty Johnson's a totally good complimentary number 2 back. But right now they're free agents. So going into it, just James Cook and Nyheim Hines is going to
correct. Right now, our roster officially is James Cook and Nyheim Hines. And I will say some of it, Brandon Beane is not incented to say anything not only negative, but if he's negotiating a pay cut with Nyheim Hines, it's in his favor to speak reasonably favorably of it. I am confident, and I said it on my little cap update. You'll hear it in the salary cap extravaganza. Nyheim Hines is not going to be on this roster at $5 million, but I won't be shocked if he's on this roster. I think he could be here. So, you know, if that's the 3 running backs and it's Josh Allen, if it's James
also
Cook,
Josh Allen running back, yes.
Also Josh Allen. If it's James Cook, Nyheim Hines, and Ty Johnson, that probably will work. It doesn't even need to be a draft pick. That probably will work. And the best available undrafted free agent that we always fall in love with.
Breaking case of emergency,
yeah, and you put him on the practice squad, that would probably work. I won't be upset if they draft a guy. So as a shout out to fantastic producer Chris Kepner, I will give credit that is it Audric Estime? Is his first name Audric? I think it's something like that.
I don't pay attention to Notre Dame, but yeah.
Whatever. The Notre Dame running back Estime, who is like a thick, like a tough dude. I would love that kind of guy. I don't want to pay anything for him, but if one of our 5th or 6th round picks is a big, thick back like that, or whatever, that Ray Davis guy from Kentucky, or whatever the best 225-pound guy that's left, if that guy beats out Ty Johnson, I won't be upset about that either. Mm-hmm. But I just don't want to spend any extra on it. I want cheap guys doing what they're supposed to do and working through it there. And if it's some combination of a receiving back who beats out Nyheim Hines and a tough running back who beats out Ty Johnson plus James Cook, any combination of those 3, I'm good to go.
Sure. Yeah. Same page.
All right. You lead off wide receiver.
Wide receiver, as it stood in 2023, good enough to win with. Heading into free agency, minus a Gabe Davis, minus Trent Sherfield, minus Deontay Hardy. Not that those guys contributed a lot, but it needs to be better. Obviously, I think everybody, when we get to the needs part of this episode, that's going to be on there. Spoiler alert, wide receiver is going to be a need here. But Steph Diggs, the conversation around Steph Diggs is actually blowing my mind. a little bit.
Way overboard.
He definitely had a drop off. I'm not saying that nothing was wrong at the end of the season. We don't know all the whys, but he's still a top number 1 wide receiver in the NFL. He wasn't a top 3 like we've been used to for the year, but he was still top 10, top 15 in pretty much every metric when it comes to wide receivers. So he's still got game. I don't think he's hit the age cliff that people are talking about. I don't think anything's wrong. He's going to be a Buffalo Bills player next year. He will be on the roster. We don't have to replace that wide receiver 1.
Very likely 2 more years. There's not a realistic out in his contract until 2026. He's very, very likely on the roster because, and I went over this on Twitter today for some people. Some people tried to bring up that, you could technically trade him after June 1st. And unfortunately, we're $50 million over the cap. All the different levers you have to pull and switches you have to flip to get under that, to then also find $9 million more to trade away Stephon Diggs and not take anything back of value that costs anything or any player. Like the needle you'd have to thread to do that and find additional switches to flip to be able to fit him, there's no feasible chance to do. So it's not literally 0%, but there's no practical way it can possibly happen. And it's not much better next year. He's going to be here for 2 more years. And honestly, he's going to be good for 2 more years. He's still a really good receiver.
I said it. He's going to probably have another 100 catches, 1,000 yards. Like he's just going to put in that type of work. And here's the other thing, man. Like people talk about the diva stuff on him. This isn't like an Antonio Brown situation where like if he was like that, I could understand
off
trying
the field.
or just like a tyrant. But like really, it seems I think that he doesn't always do the best job at delivering his message, but the most of it is just in the media, and like people run with things that aren't true, of like him taking off before because he didn't speak to the media, him taking off. But then Sal Capaccio says, no, actually, he was one of the last guys in the locker room.
One of the last ones in the locker room the whole time.
It almost always comes out that it's not what it's being said to be. And so if he was an Antonio Brown, though, and it was like chaos and he was tearing apart the locker room and he was not a team captain and not a good teammate, then I could see Bean maybe trying to thread that needle you're talking about versus destroying his locker room. But it doesn't appear to me, at least, that any of that's actually the case, and that wide receivers are a little weird. They're cryptic. They're wonky.
He loves attention. He's the kind of guy, like how many other people, hell, on the Bills roster that or that anyone famous in this area that also goes to the Met Gala and dresses up in like legitimately high fashion and does like fashion shoots and model runway stuff, and like
Von Miller,
he loves attention. He loves attention. He loves attention. So I'm not shocked that he continues to do things that elicit attention. It's but not shocking.
So for me, it's definitely
and there's nothing wrong with that. Like I don't care. No. He shows up every game day and plays. We're all pretty sure he played through something that he didn't even want reported in the second half of the year. So I had it the same way. I had it as good enough to win with. Now needs better because we need that investment. So exact same page. Leading off tight end, I have good enough to win with. I think it's not at the point where I'm going to make a case that it's on the higher end. I kind of did a 5-point scale. So I had a 2, a 3, or a 4 in my good enough to win with. I just had it as a solid 3. I'm excited that I think Dalton Kincaid could be better than that. This year, he was inconsistent. He had some moments where we needed more, a little bit more from him. Dawson Knox is not a good value, but he's a very good wide receiver 2 or tight end 2 because he's a very good, like legit old school hand in the dirt blocker and can go out as a receiver. We obviously need more consistent catching, but tight end's not a problem. Between those guys, Quentin Morris and Reggie Gilliam, I don't need anything. I don't need any additions. I'm totally good. Those guys are fine.
Yes, and another bad news for people: Dawson Knox's contract's not going anywhere
we can't do that
at all. You can't do anything with
it. We can't do a thing.
He is here.
He's in the phase of an extension where it actually costs us a lot more money to trade him or to cut him. Trading him is technically possible, but you'd need to find somebody who wants to take on that contract, and I don't think anybody wants to take it.
No, but what I will say is I agree with you. I have it good enough to win with, and it's going to be good enough to win with going into next year. And I would make the case that there's not a lot of better tight end rooms in the NFL between the two of them and the skill sets they provide, and assuming Dalton Kincaid continues to grow as a player with a full off season.
The quality of tight end 3s and fullback pseudo tight ends across the league. Honestly, other than the two teams in the Super Bowl who have like legitimate depth at
Right.
tight end / fullback, like I don't know a lot of teams that, like, the Bills are up there in top 10 for sure.
Oh,
In
for sure.
overall tight end fullback room, like that kind of
And
that
Dawson
group.
Knox,
It's
I
really
think,
good.
is more liked league wide than he is by Bills fans in terms of like what
Yeah.
the league
Well,
thinks of him.
we can't separate the contract. We can't
Right.
separate the contract and like, oh my God, he's not a $14 million player. Well, no, he's not. But that doesn't, like, there's a huge difference between isn't worth his contract and is a bum who shouldn't be on a roster.
Correct.
Dawson Knox would be unemployed for 15 minutes.
Right.
He would immediately have a huge list of suitors who wanted to sign him immediately. And then it would be, oh, well, yeah, he is probably a $6.5 million guy or a $7 million guy. He's just, we signed him to too much money. And that happens sometimes. We have some really good contracts that turned out great, and we have a couple that haven't been great. It's just, nobody bats 1,000. But he's good.
Yep.
All right, your turn. I separated offensive tackle and interior O-line. Did you do separate or did you do O-line altogether?
I did the whole entire unit of
Okay,
O-line.
go ahead and lead off O-line.
Yeah, we could separate it too if you want, but for the entire O-line, I had it as good enough to win with. And I think going into free agency, it's the same. This is the best that Sean McDermott.
One of the few areas that we don't have a legitimate need.
Every offseason, you and I have been doing this show. Offensive line is littered with needs, and I've never had it as good enough to win with. It's always been needs better. And I'm really happy with Aaron Cromer. I don't know if anyone has had a chance to listen to Eric Wood's podcast with Mitch Morse. If you haven't, I implore you to go give that listen to. One, Eric Wood's podcast is always a great listen. But having those two sit down, the type of guys they are to sit down and talk was just awesome. But they were gushing over Aaron Cromer. They both had different experiences, with Aaron Cromer being in Buffalo 2 different times. And just, I think the guy we think of is because we think of the arrest, and the worst thing that happened to him was public. And we think like, oh, this guy's just like a rah football dude. But the way they talked about him was like, he is like a cerebral assassin when it comes to offensive line coaching. And just the 2 of the guys that I respect the most along the Bills offensive line over the last decade are just gushing over this coach. And you see what he's done with these guys. The development of Spencer Brown, Osiris Torrance coming in as a rookie and just playing at a good level all year long, not hitting that hump. The way he used David Edwards in this offense, like, the league is trending back even to the conversation about tight ends. Some of that work that Dawson Knox has become as a blocker is a direct correlation from Aaron Cromer and his blocking schemes. And the league is getting bigger. I know a lot of people want to spread out and just throw a bunch of wide receivers out there and just spread the ball around, but we're seeing offenses get bigger, have additional blockers, have tight ends on the field and running blocking schemes. And I'm really excited about this unit for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, and I mean, just don't try to take his beach chair. That's the only thing that matters.
I get it, man.
Hey, I don't want people taking my beach chair either.
Right.
So I don't know why I split it, because I had both of them graded the same. It's super weird that like 9 of our 10 offensive linemen are coming back, and I think we're good. Like, I don't need much of anything else to change. Jermaine Ifedi is leaving, and there's a question of what Tommy Doyle is or isn't when he comes back. Ryan Vandemark actually was pretty good, and he's the one who went in the game when we needed like a snap for anyone to come in. David Edwards was a really nice piece, and I think it's really wild that if you look at the way the Bills played this year, it was the first time in a long time that we had all 5 guys start every single game, and most of them all play a crazy amount of snaps. It was 96.2, 99.7. Osiris Torrance literally played 100 every single snap. Connor McGovern 97.5, Mitch Morris 96.9. Like, everybody played. David Edwards, so he never started a single game. We never had anyone miss any legitimate time. He played 150 snaps. That's a lot of snaps to fit. It's actually, with special teams, is 228. So just offensive snaps, not any special teams. He played 148 snaps. That's a lot for a 6th lineman and that many jumbo sets to be able to go in there for. But in complete honesty, if you told me that next year that needed to be Ryan Bates or Alec Anderson, I wouldn't all of a sudden be like, oh no, we're going to be in huge trouble. Like, I kind of think Ryan Bates could be that 6th guy. He was 2 years ago. Like he was that sixth guy and jumbo set guy. So if David Edwards wants to come back for the same contract he got last year, I would totally be on board. If he thinks he earned a starting spot somewhere else, which he might have done, God bless him. I wish him all the best. It's going to be the first time in forever that I guess maybe a center of the future draft pick could be something I would be open to, but we don't need to sign any free agents because if Morris leaves, Ryan Bates will be the starting center. We will, it's not like somebody else is going to be there. I don't think a rookie is going to overtake Bates. If we draft a guy of the future, I'd be fine. If we drafted a day 3 offensive tackle to find a competitor for Doyle and Van Denmark, I'd be okay. But if we don't make a single investment at offensive line besides undrafted free agents and veteran minimum signings, I won't freak out. And that's been forever since I felt that way.
Yeah, I would love to get Edwards back, just so you could keep it the same. And something super interesting to me. I love EPA. Been kind of scouring through it as the season ended here, and there was a lot of conversation about personnel groupings right this year when Ken Dorsey was around, and they were trying to get 12 personnel to work, and people were hating it because it wasn't working, so they started blaming 12 personnel. But when you go look at APA per pass. 12 personnel was their actually best EPA per pass, just for the haters out there of 12 personnel. They had a 0.58, but it was Sumer Sports does it with the extra O lineman. They put an asterisk next to it, and the top 2 EPA per pass were with that extra lineman, and the number 3 EPA per pass was 11 personnel with the extra O lineman. So whether or not it's Edwards or, to your point, Bates, they've unlocked something there where there's a high efficiency and the offense is performing better when bringing in that extra alignment. I really think Sean McDermott and his staff don't get enough credit for being on the progressive side of the trends of football. And I think we saw that this year of them kind of moving into more 12 and 21 personnel and bringing in the extra lineman type stuff.
So I'm going to share this real quick. And in case people are like, yeah, but how much of that is, Joe Brady in favor of? Is that something that he, is going to want to utilize more of? Can you guess where Joe Brady took over as offensive coordinator and look at David Edwards' snap count the rest of the way?
Right.
So a lot of zeros and single digits. He took over right here in this week, and every single week from there on was like 15% or above, or double digits or above the whole way. So obviously that was a big Joe Brady element the rest of the way. So I certainly think that whether it's David Edwards or somebody else, we're going to see that as an option of something we need to do.
Yeah.
All right. So I did separate edge rusher and defensive tackle. I had defensive end last year. I do think it was good enough to win with. And if you looked, I think it was Chris Seth, if you're on Twitter at low buffa ceilings, he looked at like the first half of the year when everybody was healthy, how good the production was. And then as we had the foot injury for, Gregory Rousseau, the injury for AJ Epinesa, some of the different things. And we had to lean really heavily on a lot of snaps from Shaq Lawson and a lot of snaps from even Kingsley Jonathan, and just stuff that we weren't quite, really looking for. Leonard Floyd had to play all the time. It started to really impact it. Even a guy that I was very excited about in Leonard Floyd did kind of wear down as the season went on. So now I have it as need better because we need investment in that area, where I think technically our only defensive ends on the roster right now are Gregory Rousseau, Von Miller, and Kingsley Jonathan.
Yeah.
So we obviously need investment there. I think we'll see both some free agent signings, probably some value signings. I don't think we spend a lot of money. I'm not even sure. I don't know if we can keep Leonard Floyd or AJ Epinesa. I think there's a chance both of them might have priced themselves out of our market. Shaq Lawson was like a veteran minimum guy, so whether we replace him or bring him back at that same cheap price, I don't really know or care.
Yeah.
But we need investment and a draft pick. We're going to need a signing or two and a draft pick or two. We need probably 3 bodies at defensive end to be able to go along. So it's somewhere, it's not at the top of my needs list. We'll get there, but it's still up there in the top 4.
I agree with you on the Lofton exercise in terms of good enough to win with this year. In fact, this was a really good unit. Even when injuries started to pile up in terms of pressures, adjusted sack rate, run stuff rate, which has been a real Achilles heel of this Bills defense for years, right? Like they've always had good defenses, good pass defenses, but they would get run on. Some of that will be on the defensive tackle side, but Group adds to that. Like you've got some legitimate, really good run defenders, and a healthy Von Miller also would be a good run defender. And so there was a lot of good things to like about that group. But yeah, a lot of free agents, guys are just probably not going to be able to get back. I think AJ Epinesa has done enough league wide to generate some interest. That's just
I see him as like a 3-year, $24 million deal, like $8 million a year, and that's not going to be one we can kind of hide the money on. I'll be happy if AJ Epinesa comes back, but I expect him to get a deal where we're like, oh, I didn't know he was going to get that much, and oh, hey, good for him. Like I expect it to be that kind of thing for him.
Yeah, he's I think he's like an NFL guy's guy. Like I think coaches are going to like what he shows on tape and try to unlock a little bit more even than the Bills were able to get out of him. This for me going in the offseason is really creeping up in terms of this is a premier position. And I think Bills fans don't want to think about spending premium assets because of what has been given to the defensive line over the years. And unfortunately for Brandon Beane, he's done a lot of good things, but some of that investment just didn't work out, right? Like the double draft picks. Now you're going to lose AJ Epinesa. Basham didn't work out.
Epinesa finally developed and now we can't afford him.
You're not going to be able to get him back. Von Miller.
Leonard Floyd was obviously a very good signing. Leonard Floyd was easily worth the contract, but now he's probably going to want that again, and we probably can't do $9 million again.
No, and the Von Miller doesn't look great. I mean, Beane didn't know he was going to blow out his ACL, but it didn't. But I will say with Von, it looked like it's trending in the right direction. Hopefully a full off season will be good, but because he's also aging out, it really, you talked about it's Von Miller, Groot, and Kingsley Jonathan. To me, the future only shows Groot, right? Like Greg Rousseau is the only future. So I think it's probably an investment that's a little bit uncomfortable for Bills Mafia in those first few picks, or even moving up to get something, because it is a premium position, and I think they prioritize it even though they've missed.
Yeah. So we'll see. Von Miller has a lot of the same vibes as Dawson Knox. My comments there, where it's clearly not a good value. He was playing at a very high value. Like he had those like game-closing sacks against the Rams, against the Chiefs. We felt great about it. But then, oh my God, the mid-30s guy just blew out his ACL. That's probably not going to be great. Yeah. He finally started to look better in the couple of playoff games. So I at least have some hope that, hey, he at least could be an NFL player next year. He's not going to be a game day inactive and just eating his guaranteed contract. I think he's going to play, but I also think he's at a point in his career where he's going to be like a 40% of snaps rotational guy, and we just hope that he contributes for a pass rush standpoint.
Right.
So we'll see where that goes next year. I'll be happy if either Floyd or Epinesa are back, but I don't know that I expect either.
Yeah.
Lead us off for defensive tackle.
Well, so it was good enough to win with this year, especially when healthy in the beginning. Healthy Daquan Jones was one of the best defensive players in the NFL to start this year. When he got injured, one of the most devastating blows to the Bills this year, especially just the way everybody was trending and playing. And Ed Oliver really came on and finally became the pick that everybody wanted him to be. We've talked about that a lot. And then the depth was nice. I've been a hard on Jordan Phillips in the past, but he is nice in that third rotational defensive interior guy. That's a nice move. And then Tim Settle didn't really pan out to what I thought he would here with the Bills, but still good depth. A guy that kept Poona Ford, who I think is a good player. I know you like Poona Ford. They kept him inactive, but I think it was because of the depth they've had here. And then bringing in a Linval Joseph as sort of a reserve cavalry kind of guy, to come in and just fill in the depth there. It was awesome in 2023. And it showed up in the run stuffing and their ability to not get run over. And it showed up with what the middle linebackers or the linebackers were able to do this year. And so it was a really good one. But in terms of getting going forward, you obviously need better because it's just Ed Oliver. Like you don't, there's no other.
It's the Will Smith meme,
it is.
Like where he's looking around in the room and like he's the only one left.
Yeah.
Right now, Ed Oliver is the only person under contract. Technically, Eli Ankow is a futures contract, which is like a camp invite contract. But Ed Oliver is the only player truly under contract at the position. So I have it as I actually have it as the number one need. So need better. because it's only at Oliver. Of course we do. So I really hope that we see Daquan Jones extended. If we don't, I know Eric shared some names like T.R. Tart.
Yeah.
He also, we talked a little bit about a couple other options that are out there for some guys who could be at least a decent fit. They need a one tech and a backup one tech, and they need a rotational 3 tech. So maybe
So
we don't
both
go
guys
5
from
deep.
Texas.
Yes,
in the draft.
yes, legitimately. Oh, yes. Like, dude, I know so little about the draft. All I know is I want
those big
Tavondre
boys.
Sweat.
Yeah.
Like Tavondre Sweat, like the 6'4", 364 pounds, and him absolutely mashing the poor centers at the Senior Bowl. That dude can move. So if we could somehow re-sign and extend Daquan Jones and draft Tavondre Sweat, I'd feel better about one tech than I have ever. So we'll see where it goes, but obviously we need a huge investment there.
Yeah, and it's going to bleed into this next group here too.
Yeah, it makes a huge impact on the linebackers, and so we obviously played a great deal of this season without Matt Milano. So how we graded him last year, there was a lot of movement and shift. The idea of what we saw from Terrell Bernard and the full return of Matt Milano, because a broken bone is not normally impactful on future performance. That's not like the recovery from an ACL or something like that. Like, I expect the full Matt Milano back next year. The idea of having full Matt Milano and now what we see Terrell Bernard is, this is my only other spot that I put it as a win because of. I think that they have the kind of impact, and you talked about the slight shift we've seen in offenses getting a little bit bigger, a little bit more trying to be more balanced and being able to turn and run. Having 2 linebackers who have the versatility and movement skills and run plus pass, where you don't need to take either of them off the field ever, and the 2 of them can just play 100% snaps all the time really, really well at legitimately all pro levels that we've seen. I think there's a chance that could become a win because of. So maybe it's a little, optimistic in what we see there. I do think we still need to figure out who the third base defense linebacker is. Is it Balen Spector? Is it Dorian Williams? Or do we need that guy? But just the fact of Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, Dorian Williams, Balen Spector, I feel good at linebacker. I'm sure we'll have a mid-round pick for special teams in development or some veteran free agent cheap signing to round out the room and have 6 of them in the room. But the fact that I know we have Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard next year, I feel really, really good about linebacker.
Yeah, I'm feeling good going forward. It's interesting. If you would have asked me, did Lofton exercise right before the season, it would have been a huge position to need for me. I probably would have said you need better. And then now with what we saw from Terrell Bernard and knowing who Matt Milano is as a player, I don't have it as a win because of, but it's close, right? Like, they are good enough to win with, and depending what's in front of them, I think could unlock that next level of just being just total dominating the type of linebackers that everybody's trying to get. And the point you make, and the only question mark is, can Dorian Williams fit in to be that third guy in that group, or can Balen Spector stay healthy enough to stay on the field and be that guy? I do think they'll bring in a special teams player, but I don't think he's going to be competing to be that third linebacker. And as much as I hate this world and hated the conversation about dime and stuff last year, and I want Taron Johnson on the field all the time, the NFL is changing a bit, and the Bills are going to have to find a way to get a little bit bigger sometimes and have a guy they can rely on to play that third. So that's probably the only question mark about that group right now heading into the offseason.
Yeah, and we'll see where that goes. I hadn't considered it at all, because everyone had been asking about, which of the outside corners can shift to safety, because we got too many outside corners and we got to get one of them on the field. And debates of, hey, we talked about it with Christian Benford last year, or, hey, if Trey White comes back, could he, or if Kyer Elam can he able to? And I hadn't really thought about it, but you mentioned, like, hey, if we need to be able to use base defense because we can't let teams dictate to us, maybe there's more Micah Hyde transition with Taron Johnson than what I initially wanted to think. And that if that's the path where, hey, he could be on the field 100% of snaps and we don't ever want to take him off, is that crazy to think that he could play some safety or transition? Like, because that's Micah played that nickel spot for his whole contract in Green Bay and then switched to safety. I had never considered it because I don't like taking guys out of a spot where they were awesome at already. But it just made me wonder, like, is that crazy to be the reason that we keep him on the field 100% of the times?
I have to get back to you on that one. I don't know. I don't love the idea of Taryn as a safety. He just doesn't seem
Anything
like,
other than
yeah,
well,
I
but
just
he's so
don't.
good in run support too coming up.
He's
Like,
good in run support. I don't know if he's rangy enough for them to feel good to
sure,
do some of the stuff that Micah
he
could
is
do
compact and
athletically.
small.
Yeah. It's a tough one. That's
I
going to be a tough one.
I
for him
had
going
never
forward, yeah.
considered it. I had
Sure.
never considered it. But then somebody brought that up and it's like, well, if you ask me whose skill set translates more, I guess I would pick him.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was just
Mhm.
a you know, something I hadn't really thought about.
Yep.
All right. Where speaking of cornerbacks, what do you have there?
So on this group, I think it's good enough to win with, assuming you get Trey White
Heck,
back to.
I was borderline saying you could win because of it. I didn't, but
It's
we're bringing back a lot of talent in all pro and then 4 deep at outside.
yes. There's some. I think for me, it's the unknown of Trey White, right? The coming off an
Okay.
ACL, almost being back to the where I knew Trey White could play, and then dealing with an Achilles. How does he come back? We know there was a bit of a mental hurdle for him to get back after the ACL. That took a while. Achilles are different. It does seem like guys come back a little bit stronger from the Achilles. Doesn't take that whole year and a half.
Are new techniques
Yeah.
in the anchoring. I think it's called anchoring, where they found a way to be able to actually secure it better. And now way more guys are coming back to previous levels than what they did before.
Where I think that was the problem with the Von Millers. Yes, we've seen guys recover from ACLs quickly, but the average is not still a quick recovery, and that it does take a full year and a half before you start to become the player that you were. That's really probably the question mark keeping me from putting it over the top to a win because if it's Trey White coming back, even at a 85-90% of who Trey White is playing with Rasul Douglas and Taron Johnson in the nickel, that's better than we've ever had in Buffalo. And I can't wait to see those guys playing together with Christian Benford as your cornerback, a rotational guy. And I'm still not out on Kaiir Elam. Like that depth, you're going all the way down to Kaiir Elam as your third guy off the bench. And who knows if they bring back a Cam Lewis, who's like a rotational defensive back. That room has a lot of versatility. It's good. I would love that. But again, it hinges on what version of Trey White are we going to get back and how quickly do we see him get back to his ceiling, wherever that is now.
So the position coach that reportedly was not a very big Kaiir Elam fan has now left the organization. So I'm sure Kaiir Elam feels a sense of relief today,
Right.
that he at least gets a fresh start with Jahmile Addae.
Clean look.
So we'll see where that goes. I would love to see a mid-round developmental pick specifically as a backup for Taron Johnson. I've hated it that the last 2 years we don't have a backup nickel on the roster. It's always this weird band-aid of like, well, I guess it could be Saran Neal or maybe it could be Cam Lewis. Like, no, go get like nickel corner matters. Pick a guy who could play special teams and contribute on the game day roster and be a backup nickel and just draft him. Like that is a position that you need sometimes. It's like a backup one tech. Like, no, they don't play a ton of snaps.
They can play in the slot.
But you can't not have one. You still need a guy who can play in the slot. And we have a bunch of guys who are only outside and can't move inside. So go get one of those guys.
You wouldn't only have one slot receiver, right? You're going to have multiple guys at the receiver position that can play that position in case Khalil Shakir gets hurt.
Thank God we haven't lost Taron Johnson for any extended periods of time.
Yeah, I don't know what his brain is made out of, but it recovers well. And he has not had to miss any time in that type of way. Early on in his career, he missed time, but the Bills weren't so reliant on him as they have been since he's become the player that he is. I would be interested to see them maybe with the type of depth that they have. Like, can Christian Benford do some of those things too? Like, he's really good in run support. Can he be sort of that band-aid in the meantime?
Play style, it's Rasul Douglas. Rasul Douglas is the guy who plays in that middle space. I'm just saying, if Trey White comes back,
sure,
and you have there, like that would, if we was like, hey, like we lost Taron Johnson for 6 weeks, we need somebody to be able to do that. It would be Trey White and Christian Benford on the outside and make Rasul the nickel cornerback that doesn't come off field. So either way, it is going to be interesting because I think a couple of people have brought up Rasul Douglas is obviously a starting caliber player. He is under contract already, and I hope we extend him. That's going to be a big part of creating cap space. Christian Benford has shown to be a starting caliber corner. Trey White, we know, was playing at a really, really high level before he got hurt and was looking like the Trey of old. I expect him to want to come back. And I think a lot of people like get a little confused. Like, he's 29. It's not like he's like 35. Like, he's 29. He just turned 29 like 2 weeks ago. I expect him to come back into play. I don't know if he's going to be a great value, but cutting him, you only save $6 million. I think he's a $6 million player. I think he's still a $6 million player. I don't think, and one, you can't cut players while they're injured. So all these people who are like, oh, we're gonna cut Trey White, you can't. No. That's not how it works in the NFL. He's recovering from an injury. You can't cut him. And I also don't think they're going to have him rehab the whole time to maybe pass a physical in training camp and then cut him. What good does that do you?
This team loves Trey White too.
It doesn't give you, he's going to be on the roster. I promise. For anybody who has any ideas of that the Bills are going to move on from Trey White, please get it in your head. He is going to be on the roster in 2024. He is not going to get cut because they can't do it when they need the cap space. And then when he is eligible to pass a physical where they could cut him, you're past that point. Yeah. And you might as well have him in camp and play because he passed physical. And if he passes a physical, you feel good about having him. You're going to let him come in and compete. So it's not going to. And
non-starter.
And now Achilles injuries are now 4-month injuries. He's gonna do all the mini camp, let alone training camp. He's going to be back fully ready for mini camp, and he's going to be cleared for physical, I would bet, in training camp. Yeah. So we'll see where that goes. Lead us off for safety.
Safety was, this was a position that I think there was some frustration and the idea that they lost a step. But I think overall, when you look back at the season, it was still good enough to win with. And those guys still had, like Jordan Poyer, even at the end of the season, man, he was balling out at the end of the year. It isn't the Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer that we were used to in the peak couple of years ago, where they were just playing some of the best football and some of the best safety tandem.
They were the best safety tandem in the league.
Correct. They dropped from that, but it was still good enough to win when it's still a good group. And as bad as Taylor Rapp felt at times, that addition of him being able to come in and drop Jordan down and that type of versatility that they had in the safety room and some of the pieces that they have there, I've been really hard on Cam Lewis, but he is also a good versatile depth piece, special teamer. Damar Hamlin coming back from what he went through, just even play football ever again, but also a good special teamer. And when he's had to step in and be a starter, not as bad as people think, and actually played some good football. There's good depth there. Saran Neal, still also a really good special teamer and has stepped in certain situations and done well. So I think it's a good enough to win with group, but obviously going into free agency does not sound like Micah Hyde is ever going to do football again from the way his wife wrote that note. His way of kind of talking about it at the end of the season. I mean, that's a big hole, both in leadership and just somebody next to Jordan that is going to have to be replaced. So you need better at this position. And it's going to be one of the top needs going into the offseason.
100% agree. It was good enough to win with, although at the lower end of that scale than it used to be. It now is a needs better, and arguably it's in my top tier of needs. We'll get to in a moment here. Jordan Poyer is on the roster, but has not a guarantee in that contract. They could move on if they want to, but they don't have any other safeties. So I think that he's going to stay. And I think he's the kind of player that on principle, I don't think will take it well if they go to him for a pay cut. So I kind of think he's either on the roster at that number or he would go somewhere else. It is what's in my head. Damar Hamlin,
even his career, the way the free agency didn't pan out, he doesn't want to take less.
He's already a great bargain at the number that he's at. He doesn't I think some people were critical of him last year, but you got to remember he was brought back at like less than half the money he got previously. So this wasn't like he wasn't the same huge contract. We used to pay him as like a $12 million former all pro. Well, now he's a $5 million player. he played that well. He played at that caliber level. We probably got decent value for $5 million of what he did.
Plus
And that's
leadership.
the kind of
Yeah.
and that's the kind of number that he has this year where we don't have anybody else. I do expect him to be on the roster. I don't think Damar Hamlin is a roster lock. I think he could easily get beaten out for a roster spot. So I expect safety to be a spot where we see a starting caliber-ish cheap signing. Safety is also a very deflated market. We got Taylor Rapp for 1.77 mil. We got Taylor Rapp and Jordan Poyer for a combined $6.7 million last year.
Right.
So if that's what the market's like again, and we can sign a guy who can compete for a starting spot at $2 million, that plus honestly a top 3 or 4 round safety pick, maybe even pick 28, could be a safety if like Cam Kitchens is sitting there. I think that's a primary spot. We need 2 investments there, minimum, if not 3. There could be Jordan Poyer and 3 new people around him as a special teams guy that signed at a veteran minimum, a guy who could compete as a starter, and then a premium draft pick. Or if we sign a guy we think we could start, maybe a day 3 pick that develops. But I expect 2 or 3 new names at safety.
I am still higher on Damar Hamlin than a lot of people. I think that he's gonna. That off season was weird for him too. So I'm expecting to see him with a full off season here. Players I spoke to spoke really highly of him before the incident, so I'm hoping to see him recover to what I think he can be. But I agree in terms of you gotta get, whether it is through free agency and trying to get a decent deal on a starting caliber player or attacking it really early in the draft. That's going to be the constant philosophy conversation that I'm having with how to utilize our assets with the draft capital is, do you take wide receiver 6 or safety 1 and lock down that safety position here long-term, knowing how important it is to get a guy in there, and it would be perfect timing to get him in with a Jordan Poyer who knows what Sean McDermott wants safeties to do. And you get that new starting big time, not blue chip, but first round prospect to work with Jordan to understand disguising the coverages and what Sean McDermott is trying to do on that back end, I think is a crucial thing for the Bills defense going forward. So I think it's got to be a high end investment. Or if you're going to patch it together, probably on the higher side of free agency, which will probably be the only position the Bills can get in on the higher side of free agency. It would be attacking this need.
Yeah. And I know some people like RJ's not alone here in thinking that Jordan Poyer looked like a liability. It's just not accurate. He wasn't.
I thought he looked pretty good in the playoffs.
Every player in the NFL looks bad in open space against Devon Achane. Like people have were there a couple open field spots where he didn't look great against crazy fast guys? Yes.
Jordan was.
Guess what? Fred Warner looks like crap in open space against Devon Achane. Minkah Fitzpatrick looks like crap in open space against Devon Achane. He's the fastest player in the NFL. Of course, Jordan Poyer looked bad in open space against Devon Achane. Jordan Poyer was fine. He was a starting caliber player. He wasn't the all-pro that he was a couple seasons ago, but he was fine. He was not a liability. He was not a problem.
I thought he was actually playing pretty well towards the end of the year and in the stretch. And he was never a freak athlete like Jordan Poyer. He's not that dude.
Correct. Eric reminds us of it all the time when we try to say he lost a step, but he wasn't that fast to begin with. He's always had to like be careful with his angles and not get caught in space. He's never been that fast.
Both those guys, RAS scores, both Micah and Jordan. I think if people go back and look at them, like they're not. Micah is like a smooth athlete and he's got great hand-eye coordination. But yeah, they're not crazy freak athletes. They just weren't.
Yeah. One last one. Special teams, I put needs better.
Yeah.
Although there's not much we can do about it. We're going to get a new punter. But Tyler Bass, we just got to hope he has a bounce back season.
Sam Martin had that good stretch and then got hurt. That was a bummer that he got hurt.
Stretch and then, And honestly, if he hadn't got hurt, I think he would. But now, like, he's also older and his contract is not worth paying him extra. He's not worth above the minimum.
Yeah.
And he is. Like, we actually saved like $1.2 million by cutting him. Mm-hmm. We could use that money. So just draft a guy or undrafted free agent or veteran minimum, just whoever. I don't care. It's a punt. Every punt is a turnover. I don't give a shit.
For Bass, I wish I had it on me. It's in the other room. I just picked up a book, Sports Psychology for Dummies. I'm trying to work on my golf game and not fold it under pressure.
Can you talk to Chuck Knobloch or something?
I think that Tyler might need to borrow that book. this offseason because he's not going anywhere.
Ain't nothing we can do. He got $7 million guaranteed. He ain't going nowhere.
We need him to
we
get
just
that
have to
right.
hope he does better. That's it. We just have to hope he has a better year.
Yeah.
All right. We've already hinted at them. I will start out my top 3 I did tiers. I did 4 tiers just because I listed out like every roster spot that we needed.
Sure.
So some of them are lower, but the top 3 for me in their own tier, I have 1 tech defensive tackle, outside wide receiver, and safety with range, a center fielder type. I want a guy that has some speed and some athleticism at safety. Those are my top 3.
Those are my same top 3. I think in order it is the it's 1 tech, edge, and wide receiver for me. I'm not.
So you had edge above safety?
I do. Or yes. No. Sorry, I had it. 1 tech, safety, edge, wide receiver are my top needs in that top tier. For me,
I have edge 4th. I just had it technically a little bit below, although honestly it probably should be in that same top
it's
tier.
The Vaughn. It's who we get back for Vaughn, right? And just having Groot and Vaughn there, it's such a premium position, and getting to the quarterback matters so much that it's just tough for me to put it a full tier below.
Yep. Again, it's my top 4 either way. So in hindsight, I probably should have had it in that top group. I do want to see some investment at each of those. If those are some combination of our first 4 picks in the draft, I'll be really happy. The good news is 2 of them are very attainable with deflated markets. 1 tech defensive tackle has gotten pushed down in the draft and has gotten lower contracts than people think. Safety has got pushed down in the draft and has gotten lower contracts than people think. It's great timing to need those 2 spots. Unfortunately, the other side of the coin is wide receiver gets pushed up more than anything in the draft. The Christian Kirks of the world get paid crazy amounts of money. Edge rusher gets pushed up in the draft. Edge rusher gets crazy contracts. So
although if there's ever a year you needed a wide receiver,
this is a great super deep draft and a weirdly deep free agency group. So there's a chance we could get a receiver who loses the game of musical chairs and is like, well, if I'm going to take a cheap deal, I might as well go catch balls from Josh Allen.
Right.
And a really good guy fall to 28 or 60 and still add 2 legitimate contributors
and
as receivers.
There's a third level to this in terms of talent acquisition of you have a lot of receivers coming into the NFL. Jobs are going to get lost. There's going to be some business decisions on other rosters of guys that were too expensive that they're going to get cut sometimes. So there's going to be multiple ways to add wide receiver to this room. That's why it is a priority for me, but I think being able to get it, plus I think that position is a priority to get that wide receiver too, and eventually get Steph Diggs replacement, like you said, in the next couple of years here. But I think you do need a guy that can take and stretch a defense and be another threat for you. But I don't know that you need a high-end wide receiver too. You have a lot of pass catchers and stuff where I do think you need a higher end edge here going into the future, or you need a higher end other position. And that's going to be sort of the mental battle that I have here.
If we open up in the draft is like
safety,
defensive
edge.
end, safety, defensive tackle, people are going to lose their minds.
Yeah.
Like they're going to go absolutely.
Except for me, when we have Donovan Peoples-Jones as wide receiver too, and all those picks come in, it's
going to be like we're going to sign Donovan Peoples-Jones and Sterling Shepard, and then it's just going to be those guys with Khalil Shakir and Stephon Diggs, and everyone's
they'll still score 10 points.
Yeah, it'd be fine. Some other spots I did mention is we need not only a starting edge rusher, but also a rotational edge rusher. We need a rotational 3 tech. So we've had Tim Settle and Jordan Phillips for a bit here. We need someone to play there. Ed Oliver did play 65-70% of snaps. I don't mind that because he's awesome. I would like that to come back, but we need a guy to play the other 30% of snaps, or an edge rusher that does both. Sometimes you can have those wave edge rushers who can kick inside for pass rushing downs.
Yep.
I don't know what we think Khalil Shakir is next year. Do we need a stereotypical slot receiver, or do we just need another guy like him who has inside outside versatility? And between Dalton Kincaid and Shakir and another guy and Stephon Diggs for that matter, I don't know that we need a like Cole Beasley guy who is only a slot receiver. But I did list it just in case, depending on what we do the other way, I won't be upset. We also need, third safety is a spot that played more this year. We did kick. I don't know if we're going to Stephon Diggs, good Lord. The Jordan Poyer move of him as dime linebacker was very much out of necessity, but I also don't know that they hated it. Like there also were some things that made sense. We're not going to need it next year because we're going to have Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard. You're not going to take them off the field. It's good to keep them on the field in those pass rush downs, but I don't mind having a guy who can play there. So a legitimate playable third safety, backup one tech. I talked about the short yardage running back. I wouldn't mind a thick, pounding dude who could at least compete with Ty Johnson. Base defense, third linebacker, I listed just in case if we don't think it's Dorian Williams or Balen Spector, maybe a guy there who could compete. Center of the future, in case it's not Ryan Bates or Mitch Morris, maybe one interior offensive line or a swing tackle developmental guy, and then technically backup quarterback because someone has to do it. But that was like literally every roster spot that I think we're going to fill between now and then.
Yeah, in that baked into whether it is a running back or a backup for Khalil Shakir, I would like to see them get somebody that is consistent and can take the return job, even though returns aren't a big thing in the NFL. I would like to see that just get solidified. And then obviously punter, and getting a punter in here that is just consistent. We don't have to talk about it a lot and doesn't have any legal issues would be awesome.
Yeah. So we'll, that would be lovely. Although I joked earlier, they were talking about some different things. I'm like, honestly, one of my safeties, I kind of want to be sketchy and like capable of stabbing someone. I don't mind that at safety.
At safety? Like sure.
Yeah. So we'll see where it goes. As we go forward here, we're going to have lots more shows next week. We're going to, I have some travel, so we still got to figure out what we're doing and when. I do think maybe next week, Friday is my target for the salary cap extravaganza. So we'll see where that one goes. But we will have some stuff going forward on some of our existing free agents, and then we'll get into some of our free agent wish lists for some of the pieces that we're going to have to do some of your favorite things, some thrift shopping. We're going to have to figure out ways to do a little bit of thrift shopping and find some values floating out there. And I will say this year, people have to remember, Connor McGovern was a good value signing below what most other guys got. Taylor Rapp was a very cheap value. David Edwards was a very cheap value. We had some nice additions last year that ended up panning out really well for all the $1.77 million lines we threw out there. We got, a lot of guys Shaq Lawson played well. Latavius Murray contributed. We didn't end up getting the full season out of Damian Harris, but, went well. Trent Sherfield wasn't a huge hit. Some of the other ones were fine, but, we had a lot of, Terrell Dodson ended up being a fantastic value for what he signed for. So some of those value lottery ticket signings ended up panning out, and I expect that we're going to have to go that route again this year and just hope that some of them pan out.
This is honestly, like, I complain so much about this time of year, but as we get into the actual wish list, and I've started building out mine here a little bit. This is my favorite part of the offseason. I know there's a lot of folks that are draft nuts and they love the mocks and they love scouring through prospects. There's so much speculation and projection that goes into what a draft pick is going to be that I have a hard time, like, if we get this guy, we're going to get this. But when you are dealing with free agency, you're dealing with pro tape and pro experience. And it is thrift shopping. It is going to Savers and trying to find a nice Under Armour in a pile of junky clothes, right? Like you're trying to find that deal and get your hands on it. And I think Brandon Beane is good at it. I think he likes it. And I think our team, both you and I and Eric and the whole team has been really good at pinpointing. I think we got a good vibe on what the Bills look for at these positions in terms of the types of players they like, and then trying to match up with those value deals. So this is the most exciting part of this offseason stretch for me, is how can we find some guys that they're not big names, but they are going to come in and fit the Bills and fill these positions, because we know Brandon wants to, all these needs we just talked about. I think he's going to try to address as much of that as he can before he gets to the draft, so that he has more flexibility with the picks that he has to just bring in the depth that you talked about, of filling in depth with young talent, so we don't have to pay everybody going into the future.
Yeah, and I think what we'll look for, and he's done this every year, he has decreased the needs going into the draft. He hasn't always hidden it. Like
All of them,
the Tremaine Edmonds year, we needed that middle linebacker pick. There have been years where we really needed it at some of the spots, but he's certainly materially decreased it.
Yep.
As we've gone forward. So I expect the same here, but he's going to have to be very selective and value driven as we do it. So,
yep.
Any final thoughts for the people before we sign off?
No, man, hang in there with us. Join us every week here. Like we always say, this is the hardest part of the off season. It makes it much nicer when we have a full chat going and there's a bunch of people talking this out with us. And if you haven't yet, I'm going to hit the wrong button. So if you want to get the button ready, if you haven't yet, now is a great time, because you will get it for the entire offseason. You will get it for the next season and into the Super Bowl run that the Bills are going to go in on 2024. Join One Pass and listen to why from these gentlemen here. Oh, where is it? I lost the video. I don't got it. Do you have the video?
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today. I'm quitting doing production.
I only enjoy it because I know how much it annoys you. That's definitely the biggest reason that
I'm annoyed all the time. So whatever.
So thank you guys. We appreciate you very, very much. Awesome job as always by our fantastic producer Chris Kepner. Everybody else here, make sure you're checking out all the good work that we're doing on Cover One. Make sure you check out the work that is going on. Really good film room. Looking at some of the different team needs that Anthony and Eric put up here. So really looking forward to it for everything else we have going on. But on behalf of Chris and Aaron, I'm Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to the Cover One Buffalo podcast.